The dust cloud rising from the stagecoach wheels seemed to choke the very life from Olivia Jenkins, as she pressed her face against the cracked window, watching the barren landscape of the Arizona Territory stretch endlessly before her eyes. It was 1878, and she had just buried her husband 3 months prior in Philadelphia, a man 30 years her senior who had left her nothing but debts and the address of a distant cousin in Seattle, Washington Territory, scrawled on the back of an old envelope. The stagecoach lurched violently as one wheel found a particularly deep rut in the dusty trail, sending Olivia's carpetbag tumbling from the seat beside her and spilling its meager contents across the floor. She bent to retrieve her belongings, her fingers trembling as she gathered the few dresses, the tintype of her mother, and the last $5 she had to her name. The other passengers barely noticed her distress. An older man with a gray beard snored loudly in the corner, his hat pulled low over his eyes, while a stern-looking woman in black regarded Olivia with the kind of cold assessment that made her feel even smaller than she already did. At 22 years old, Olivia had expected life to offer her more than this desperate flight westward, more than the gnawing fear that kept her awake at night, more than the constant worry that she would end up starving in some unfamiliar town where nobody knew her name or cared whether she lived or died. The stagecoach driver shouted something unintelligible from above, and the horses slowed their frantic pace. Through the window, Olivia could see a small collection of buildings emerging from the dust and heat shimmer. A weathered sign proclaimed this place to be Redemption Springs, Arizona Territory, though there seemed to be precious little redemption to be found in the ramshackle structures and sun-bleached wood that made up the tiny settlement. "We will be stopping here for 2 hours," the driver called down. "Stage needs new wheels and the horses need rest. There is a boarding house where you can get a meal if you have the coin for it." Olivia's stomach clenched. She had been rationing her food carefully, but the journey from Philadelphia had taken far longer than expected, with delays and route changes that had stretched her resources to the breaking point. She calculated quickly in her mind. If she spent money on a meal here, she might not have enough to eat once she reached Seattle, assuming she even made it that far. The cousin whose address she carried might not even remember her mother's side of the family, might turn her away at the door. The stagecoach came to a halt with a final jerk that sent dust billowing through the open windows. The driver appeared at the door, offering his hand to help the passengers disembark. The stern woman went first, stepping down with practiced ease. The old man followed, stretching his back and groaning. Then it was Olivia's turn. She took the driver's weathered hand and stepped down onto the street, but her legs had gone numb from the long hours of sitting, and the relentless sun seemed to hit her like a physical blow. The world tilted sideways. She stumbled, barely catching herself, and stood there trembling on the dusty street with her carpetbag clutched in both hands. The other passengers had already disappeared into the shade of the boarding house, and the driver was busy with his horses, leaving her alone in the brutal afternoon heat. Panic rose in her throat. She did not know where to go, what to do. The buildings around her seemed to waver in the heat, and she could feel tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. This was not how it was supposed to be. She was supposed to be brave, supposed to be making a new start, but instead she felt like a lost child, abandoned and afraid. "You all right there, miss?" The voice came from her left, low and gentle, with the distinctive drawl of someone who had spent his life under the western sky. Olivia turned, blinking away the tears that blurred her vision, and found herself looking at a man who seemed to have materialized from the very dust itself. He was tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of lean, muscular build that came from years of hard work. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time squinting into the sun. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. A gun belt hung low on his hips, but his hands were raised slightly, palms out in a gesture of peace. His eyes were the color of the summer sky, and they regarded her with genuine concern. "I am fine," Olivia managed to say, though her voice shook. "Just a bit dizzy from the journey." The cowboy took a step closer, moving slowly as if he were approaching a skittish horse. "You look like you could use some water and a place to sit down. The sun out here can be fierce if you are not used to it." "I have no money for the boarding house," Olivia said, and immediately regretted the admission. Her mother had always told her never to reveal her circumstances to strangers, but exhaustion and fear had loosened her tongue. The cowboy's expression softened. "Well now, I was not suggesting you pay for anything. I was suggesting you accept some basic hospitality. My name is Xavier Kane, and I run a small ranch about 5 miles outside town. I came in to pick up supplies, but that can wait a few minutes while we get you sorted out." "I do not want charity," Olivia said, straightening her spine despite the way her legs still trembled beneath her skirts. Xavier studied her for a moment, and something that might have been respect flickered across his features. "I can see that. How about we call it neighborly kindness instead? One human being helping another. No strings attached." Before Olivia could formulate a response, the world tilted again, more severely this time. She felt her knees buckling, felt the carpet bag slipping from her fingers. Then strong arms caught her, and she was being lifted with surprising gentleness. She wanted to protest, wanted to assert her independence, but the truth was that she had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days, and the heat and the fear had finally overwhelmed her. "Easy now," Xavier murmured, his voice close to her ear. "I have got you. You are safe." Olivia let her eyes close for just a moment, let herself lean into the unexpected safety of his arms. She heard him call out to someone, heard the jingle of spurs and the sound of rapid footsteps. Then she was being carried out of the sun and into the blessed coolness of shade. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on a narrow bed in a small, clean room. A woman with gray hair and kind eyes was pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, while Xavier stood near the door, his hat in his hands, watching with obvious worry. "There now," the woman said. "You just had a bit of a spell from the heat. Drink this." She held a tin cup to Olivia's lips, and Olivia drank gratefully. The water was cool and sweet, the best thing she had tasted in weeks. As her senses returned, she realized she was in a room at the boarding house, the very place she had said she could not afford. "I told you I have no money," she said, trying to sit up. The woman gently pushed her back down. "Mr. Kane has taken care of the room for the night and a meal. Now, before you get all prideful about it, he explained your situation. You are traveling alone to Seattle and you have had a hard time of it. There is no shame in accepting help when you need it. I can work to pay him back," Olivia said. "I can clean or cook or mend clothes. I am good with a needle." Xavier stepped forward then, his hat still clutched in his hands. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "You do not owe me anything, but if it would make you feel better, I could use some help at the ranch. My housekeeper quit 2 weeks ago and went back east to live with her daughter. The place is falling apart without someone to manage the household. If you were willing to work for room and board plus wages until the next stage comes through, it would actually be doing me a favor." Olivia studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She had learned the hard way that men rarely offered something for nothing. Her late husband had seemed kind at first too, before she discovered the gambling debts and the drinking and the way he looked at her as just another possession to be used and discarded. But Xavier's eyes were steady and honest, and there was something in his demeanor that spoke of genuine decency. More importantly, Olivia was out of options. She could not continue to Seattle with only $5, and she would not survive on the streets of this harsh territory. "How long until the next stage?" she asked. "About 3 weeks," Xavier said. "Gives you time to rest up and earn some money for the rest of your journey. Like I said, you would be doing me a favor. The house needs a woman's touch, and I am tired of eating my own cooking." The boarding house woman, who introduced herself as Martha Sullivan, nodded encouragingly. "Xavier Kane is a good man. Known him since he was a boy. His father was the sheriff here before he passed. You would be safe at his ranch." Olivia took a deep breath. What choice did she have? She could accept his offer, earn some money, and continue her journey in better circumstances. Or she could insist on her pride and likely end up dead in the desert within a week. "All right," she said finally. "I accept your offer, Mr. Kane, but I will work hard to earn my keep. I am not looking for handouts." Something that might have been relief crossed Xavier's face. "I would not expect anything less. Now you rest here tonight, get a good meal in you, and I will come by in the morning to take you out to the ranch. Martha here will make sure you have everything you need." He turned to leave, but Olivia called out, "Mr. Kane." He paused at the door, glancing back at her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me when I needed it." Xavier's weathered face softened into a smile, and Olivia felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with hunger or exhaustion. "You are welcome, Miss Jenkins," she supplied. "Olivia Jenkins." "Well then, Miss Jenkins, you are found now, darling. No need to be trembling and lost anymore. We take care of our own out here." With that, he settled his hat back on his head and disappeared into the hallway, leaving Olivia staring after him with a confusion of emotions she could not quite name. Martha bustled about, bringing her a bowl of stew and fresh bread, but Olivia barely tasted the food. Her mind was spinning with questions and possibilities she had not dared to consider before. That night, lying in the clean sheets of the boarding house bed, Olivia allowed herself to think about Xavier Kane. He was older than her, probably in his early 30s, but not so much older that it seemed improper. He had treated her with respect and kindness without expecting anything in return. Most importantly, something about him made her feel safe for the first time since her husband had died, leaving her alone in a world that had proven itself to be cold and unforgiving. She touched the place on her arms where he had caught her when she fainted, and felt again that strange flutter in her chest. It frightened her a little, this sudden awareness of a man she had just met. She had learned to be cautious, to guard her heart. But there was something different about Xavier Kane, something that made her want to believe in kindness again. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, Olivia dreamed not of the dusty trail ahead, but of blue eyes and gentle hands and a voice that promised she was found. Morning came too quickly, announced by the crow of a rooster and the sound of the town coming to life beyond her window. Olivia rose and dressed carefully in her least worn dress, a simple gray cotton that had seen better days but was still presentable. She brushed her long brown hair and pinned it up in a neat bun, trying to look as respectable and capable as possible. This was her chance to earn some money and regain her footing, and she was determined not to waste it. Martha knocked on the door just as Olivia was lacing up her boots. "Mr. Kane is here with his wagon. I have packed you some breakfast to eat on the way. No sense starting a new position on an empty stomach." Olivia accepted the cloth-wrapped package with gratitude and followed Martha down the narrow stairs to the front of the boarding house. Xavier was indeed waiting there, standing beside a sturdy wagon pulled by two horses. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his shirt less dusty and his face freshly shaven. When he saw her, he touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Morning, Miss Jenkins. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Olivia admitted. "Thank you again for your generosity." Xavier helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hands respectful as he guided her elbow. Once she was settled, he walked around to the other side and climbed up beside her, taking the reins in his capable hands. With a click of his tongue, the horses started forward, and Redemption Springs began to fall away behind them. The morning air was still relatively cool, and Olivia found herself relaxing as they traveled along the dusty road. The landscape was harsh but beautiful in its own way, with towering rock formations in the distance and hardy scrub brush dotting the red earth. Xavier pointed out various landmarks as they went, his voice easy and conversational. "That peak there is called Widow's Watch. Local tribe says it is named for a woman who waited on top for her husband to return from war, but he never did. Over there is where the old mission used to be before it burned down in '63. And if you look real careful, you can sometimes see wild horses running across those flats." Olivia listened, grateful for his attempt to make her feel comfortable. As the sun climbed higher and the wagon rolled steadily onward, she found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. In the clear morning light, she could see the character in his face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the strong jaw and straight nose. His hands on the reins were scarred and calloused from hard work, but they handled the horses with practiced gentleness. "Have you always ranched out here?" she asked, partly out of curiosity and partly to fill the comfortable silence. Xavier nodded. "My father came out here in '58, before the war between the states. He was a lawman back east but wanted a fresh start. He built the ranch with his own two hands, and then he served as sheriff in Redemption Springs for 20 years. When he died 5 years ago, the ranch passed to me. It is not much, but it is home." "And your mother?" Olivia asked, then immediately worried she had overstepped. "Forgive me, I should not pry." "It is all right," Xavier said. "My mother died when I was 12. Fever took her one winter. It was just my father and me after that until he passed. Now it is just me and about 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and more chores than any one person can manage alone." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a matter-of-fact acceptance of his circumstances. Olivia found herself admiring that quality. She knew too many people who spent their lives complaining about their lot instead of simply dealing with what life handed them. "What about you?" Xavier asked. "You mentioned traveling to Seattle. Do you have family there?" Olivia hesitated, then decided that honesty was the best policy if she was going to be working for this man. "A distant cousin I have never met. My mother's cousin's daughter. We exchanged letters years ago, and she once said if I ever needed anything, I could come to Seattle. I am hoping she remembers that offer." Xavier was quiet for a moment, and Olivia could feel him processing this information. Finally, he said, "And your husband? Martha mentioned you were widowed." 3 months ago," Olivia said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "He was much older than me. The marriage was arranged by my father before he died. My husband left me nothing but debts, and his family made it clear I was not welcome to stay in Philadelphia. So I sold what little I had and bought a ticket west." "I am sorry you had to go through that," Xavier said, and the sincerity in his voice made Olivia's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "A man should provide for his wife, protect her. Sounds like yours did neither." "He did not," Olivia agreed softly, "but that is behind me now. I am determined to make a new life for myself, one where I depend on nobody but myself." Xavier glanced at her, and something that might have been respect or perhaps understanding flickered in his blue eyes. Independence is important, but there is no shame in accepting help when you need it, or in working together with others. Out here, we all depend on each other to survive. That is not weakness. That is just good sense. Before Olivia could respond, the wagon crested a small rise and Xavier pulled the horses to a stop. There it is. That is home. Olivia looked where he was pointing and felt her breath catch. Nestled in a valley between two red rock ridges was a ranch house that looked like something out of a storybook. It was larger than she had expected, built of sturdy wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. There were several outbuildings scattered around the main house, including a large barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, and she could see a vegetable garden that desperately needed tending. "It is beautiful," Olivia said, and meant it. Xavier seemed pleased by her reaction. "It needs work. The paint is peeling, the garden is overgrown, and the inside is a disaster. But the bones are good. My father built it to last." As they descended the slope toward the ranch, Olivia felt a strange stirring in her heart. This place felt welcoming despite its worn appearance, as if it were inviting her to stay, to put down roots, to become part of something larger than herself. She tried to remind herself that this was just temporary, that she would be moving on to Seattle in 3 weeks, but the feeling persisted. 2 ranch hands appeared from the barn as the wagon pulled up to the house. They were both young men in their 20s, weather-beaten and curious. Xavier introduced them as Tom Riley and Jack Morrison. They touched their hats respectfully to Olivia, but did not linger, heading back to their work after Xavier dismissed them with a few instructions about the cattle. "They live in the bunkhouse," Xavier explained as he helped Olivia down from the wagon. "Good men, hard workers. They will not bother you. I have made it clear that anyone who disrespects a woman on this ranch will be looking for work elsewhere." Olivia appreciated the reassurance as she followed Xavier up the porch steps. The boards creaked under their weight, and she made a mental note to ask if he had hammer and nails so she could tighten them down. Her father had taught her basic carpentry before he died, skills that had served her well over the years. Xavier opened the front door and gestured for her to enter first. Olivia stepped inside and had to suppress a gasp. The front room was spacious but chaotic. Dust covered every surface, dirty dishes were piled on a table in the corner, and clothes were draped over chairs and hanging from pegs on the walls. Books and papers were scattered everywhere, and the floor looked like it had not been swept in months. "I warned you it was bad," Xavier said, sounding embarrassed. "I am not much for housekeeping, and the ranch hands are even worse. My housekeeper, Mrs. Cooper, she kept everything running smooth. Since she left, everything has just fallen apart." Olivia set down her carpet bag and rolled up her sleeves. "Well, Mr. Kane, it looks like I have my work cut out for me. Show me where things are kept and I will get started." Xavier looked at her with something like wonder. "You do not have to start today. You just got here. Take some time to rest and settle in." "I told you I was not looking for handouts," Olivia said firmly. "You are paying me to work, and work is what I intend to do. Besides, I have cleaned up worse than this." That was not entirely true, but she was determined to prove her worth. Over the next hour, Xavier showed her around the house. There were 4 bedrooms upstairs, a large kitchen with a cast iron stove, a dining room, and the main living area. He explained that she would have her own bedroom upstairs, the one that used to belong to his mother. It was at the opposite end of the hall from his room, which Olivia appreciated. The house also had luxuries she had not expected, including a pump that brought water directly into the kitchen and a real bathing room with a copper tub. My father believed in certain comforts, Xavier explained. He said my mother deserved better than hauling water from a well, so he spent 2 years digging and fitting pipes to bring water from the spring up in the hills. It is one of the few houses in the territory with indoor plumbing. Olivia was impressed. This was far better than she had hoped for. She had expected a rough cabin and outdoor facilities, not a well-appointed house with modern conveniences. Xavier left her to settle in and return to his work outside. Olivia changed into her oldest dress, tied a kerchief around her hair, and set to work. She started in the kitchen, heating water on the stove and washing every dish, pot, and pan she could find. Then she swept and scrubbed the floors until they gleamed. She organized the pantry, which was surprisingly well stocked, and made a mental list of supplies they would need soon. As she worked, she found herself humming, something she had not done since before her husband died. There was something satisfying about bringing order to chaos, about seeing immediate results from her efforts. The physical labor felt good after so many days of sitting cramped in a stagecoach. By the time the sun was beginning to set, Olivia had transformed the kitchen and dining room. The surfaces sparkled, the floors were clean, and everything was in its proper place. She had even managed to get a pot roast cooking in the oven, using some of the beef she found in the cold cellar and vegetables from the pantry. Xavier came in as she was setting the table, and he stopped dead in his tracks, staring around in amazement. "Miss Jenkins, this is incredible. I did not expect you to do all this in one day." "I told you I am a hard worker," Olivia said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. I took the liberty of cooking enough for the ranch hands as well. I thought they might appreciate a hot meal." Xavier's face went soft. "You are too kind. Let me go tell them. They usually just eat whatever beans and hardtack they can scrape together." He left to fetch Tom and Jack, and Olivia took a moment to catch her breath. Her back ached and her hands were raw from scrubbing, but she felt good. Productive, useful. It had been a long time since she felt like she had a purpose. Dinner was a revelation. The four of them sat around the dining table, and the ranch hands ate like they had never seen food before. Tom, who had red hair and freckles, declared it was the best meal he had eaten since his mother's cooking back in Kansas. Jack, who was darker and more reserved, simply nodded his agreement and asked for seconds. Xavier watched Olivia throughout the meal with an expression she could not quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something else as well. Something that made her pulse quicken and her cheeks flush. She tried to tell herself it was just the heat from the kitchen, but she knew better. After dinner, Tom and Jack returned to the bunkhouse, and Xavier helped Olivia clear the dishes despite her protests. They worked in companionable silence, and Olivia found herself very aware of his presence, the way he moved, the sound of his breathing, the occasional brush of his hand against hers. "You did not have to do all this," Xavier said as he dried the last plate. "I would have been happy with a simple meal and a clean kitchen. You have done the work of 3 people today." "I wanted to prove I can earn my keep," Olivia said. "And honestly, it felt good to work hard at something to see results. The last few months have been so uncertain, so out of my control. This felt like taking charge of my life again." Xavier set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. In the lamplight, his eyes were darker, more intense. "You are a remarkable woman, Olivia Jenkins. Your husband was a fool not to see what he had." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Nobody had called her remarkable before. Nobody had looked at her the way Xavier was looking at her now, with genuine admiration and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Xavier stepped back, breaking the spell. "You must be exhausted. Go on up to bed. I will bank the fire and make sure everything is locked up for the night." Olivia nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she was. "Good night, Mr. Kane. Good night, Miss Jenkins, and thank you for everything." Olivia climbed the stairs to her room, her mind whirling. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. She had gone from lost and desperate to employed and safe, all because a kind stranger had offered her help when she needed it most. But it was more than that, and she knew it. There was something between her and Xavier, a connection she had not expected and was not sure she was ready for. She had sworn to depend on nobody but herself, to never again put her fate in the hands of a man. Yet here she was, thinking about blue eyes and gentle hands and a voice that had promised she was found. Olivia lay down and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Through the open window, she could hear the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses shifting in the stable, the windmill creaking as it turned. It was peaceful in a way that Philadelphia had never been, calming in a way she had not experienced in years. As she drifted off to sleep, Olivia allowed herself to wonder what the next 3 weeks would bring. Would she earn enough money to continue her journey? Would she find the strength to leave this place and the man who had saved her? And most importantly, did she even want to? The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia rose with the sun and spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the house. Room by room, she worked through the chaos, scrubbing floors, washing windows, mending curtains, and bringing order to every corner. The afternoons she devoted to cooking, preparing hearty meals for Xavier and the ranch hands. The evenings were spent mending clothes, tending the kitchen garden she had begun to revive, or sometimes just sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the red rocks. Xavier was often out on the range during the day, managing the cattle and handling the endless tasks that came with running a ranch. But he made a point of coming back to the house for the midday meal and was always there for dinner. Sometimes Tom and Jack joined them, and sometimes it was just the two of them, talking easily about everything and nothing. Olivia learned that Xavier had served briefly in the territorial militia before returning to help his aging father. She learned that he loved books and reading, which explained the stacks of novels and newspapers scattered throughout the house. She learned that he was honest and hardworking, that he treated his ranch hands fairly and his animals with kindness, and that he had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh when she least expected it. In turn, Xavier learned about Olivia's childhood in Philadelphia, about her father who had been a schoolteacher before he died, about her love of reading that matched his own. She told him about the years spent caring for a demanding husband, the loneliness of that life, the relief mixed with guilt when he passed away. She did not tell him everything, did not mention the nights when her husband came home drunk and cruel, but she sensed that Xavier understood anyway. By the end of the first week, the house looked like a home again. Olivia had washed all the curtains and bedding, scrubbed every floor, organized every cupboard. She had turned the overgrown garden into neat rows of vegetables and herbs. She had even repaired the loose boards on the porch, using the tools Xavier kept in the barn. One evening, Xavier came in from the range to find her on her hands and knees in his father's old study, sorting through stacks of papers and books that had been left untouched since the old man's death. "You do not have to do that," Xavier said softly from the doorway. "That room has been closed off for 5 years. I could never bring myself to deal with it." Olivia sat back on her heels and looked up at him. "I am sorry. I should have asked permission first. I just thought it might help organizing his things, but if it is too painful, I will leave it be." Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant with memory. Then he shook his head. "No, you are right. It should be dealt with. I have just been putting it off because I did not want to say goodbye, I suppose. Sorting through his things feels so final." He came into the room and sat down on the floor beside her, picking up one of the books. It was a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. He loved to read. Used to read to my mother every evening. After she died, I would sometimes hear him reading aloud anyway, like she was still there listening. Olivia felt her heart clench with sympathy. She reached out without thinking and placed her hand over his. He must have loved her very much. Xavier looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. He did. They had something special, something rare. I used to think I wanted that kind of love for myself, but after watching him grieve for 20 years, I wondered if it was worth the pain. "And now?" Olivia asked softly. Xavier's thumb traced a gentle circle on the back of her hand. "Now I think maybe the joy is worth the risk of pain. Maybe having something real, even for a little while, is better than spending your whole life alone." The air between them seemed to shimmer with unspoken words. Olivia knew she should pull her hand away, should maintain the professional distance appropriate for an employer and employee. But she did not want to. She wanted to stay exactly where she was, connected to this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. "Olivia," Xavier said, his voice rough with emotion, "I know you are planning to leave in a couple of weeks. I know you have your own plans and dreams. But I need you to know that these past days, having you here, it has meant something to me. You have brought light back into this house, back into my life." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "Xavier, I do not know what to say. You saved me when I was lost. You gave me work and dignity when I had nothing. These days here have meant something to me too." Xavier lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and courtly, nothing inappropriate, but it sent heat racing through Olivia's entire body. She had never been courted properly, had never experienced the tender attention of a man who truly cared for her. "I am not trying to pressure you," Xavier said. "You have every right to continue with your plans, but I would be lying if I said I did not hope you might consider staying. Not as my housekeeper, but as someone who belongs here, with me." Olivia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Xavier, I barely know you. We have only spent a week together." "I know," Xavier said, "and I know you have been hurt before. I know you have every reason to be cautious. But I also know that sometimes you just recognize something right when you find it. I recognize it in you, Olivia. You feel like home." Before Olivia could respond, the sound of rapid hoofbeats and shouting came from outside. Xavier was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the gun at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, then rushed out of the room. Olivia ignored the order and followed him to the porch. Tom was riding up fast, his horse lathered and breathing hard. "Mr. Kane, we have trouble. Some of Miller's men are cutting through our north pasture, driving about 30 head of our cattle with them." Xavier's jaw tightened. "How many men?" "4 that I could see. They are armed." Olivia felt cold fear wash over her. She had heard about range disputes, about rustlers and claim jumpers. People died over cattle and land out here. Xavier turned to her, his face grim. "I have to deal with this. Lock the doors and do not open them for anyone but me or the ranch hands. Do you understand?" "Be careful," Olivia said, gripping his arm. "Please." Xavier looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. "I will. I promise." Then he was striding toward the barn, calling for Jack to saddle the horses. Olivia watched from the porch as the 3 men rode off toward the north pasture. Her heart was in her throat. every terrible possibility racing through her mind. She knew Xavier wore a gun, knew that all the ranch hands were armed. She knew that disputes over cattle could turn deadly in an instant. The wait was agony. Olivia paced the house, unable to sit still, unable to focus on anything but the men who had ridden into danger. She heated water and prepared bandages, just in case. She loaded the rifle she had found in Xavier's study, just in case. She prayed to a God she had not spoken to in years, just in case. The sun had set, and full darkness had fallen by the time she heard horses returning. Olivia rushed to the door, the rifle in her hands, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see 3 riders approaching. She recognized Xavier's tall form and felt dizzy with relief. She opened the door as the men dismounted. Xavier saw her standing there with the rifle, and something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. "It is all right. We got the cattle back. No shots fired." "Thank God," Olivia breathed, setting the rifle aside with shaking hands. Xavier climbed the porch steps and stood before her. His face was streaked with dust and sweat, and there was a hardness in his expression she had not seen before. "Miller's men claimed they thought the cattle were strays. I made it clear they were wrong and that if it happened again, we would be having a different kind of conversation. They left without a fight. But you are all right. Nobody was hurt. We are fine," Xavier said. Then, without warning, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Olivia stiffened for just a moment, then melted into the embrace, her arms going around his waist. "I was so worried," she whispered against his chest. "I was afraid you would be hurt." Xavier's hand came up to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling gently in her hair. "I am sorry I scared you, but this is the reality of life out here, Olivia. It can be dangerous. It can be hard. I need you to understand that before you make any decisions about your future." Olivia pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Do you think I am afraid of hard work or danger? I traveled across the country alone with $5 to my name. I married a man I did not love because my family demanded it. I survived poverty and loss and the death of everything I thought my life would be. I am stronger than I look, Xavier Kane." Something blazed in Xavier's eyes. "I know you are. That is one of the things I love about you." The word hung in the air between them. Love. Xavier's eyes widened slightly as if he had not meant to say it out loud, but he did not take it back. "Xavier," Olivia began, but he shook his head. "You do not have to say anything. I know it is too soon. I know you need time, but I wanted you to know how I feel. Life is uncertain and we are not promised tomorrow. I do not want to waste the time we have by hiding the truth." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I care for you too, more than I thought possible after such a short time. But I am afraid, Xavier. I am afraid to trust these feelings, afraid to believe that something good could actually happen to me." "Then do not trust the feelings," Xavier said, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Trust me. Trust that I will never hurt you the way you have been hurt before. Trust that I will treat you as the remarkable woman you are. Trust that I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice in staying." "I have not said I will stay," Olivia pointed out, but there was no conviction in her voice. Xavier smiled, that slow, warm smile that made her knees weak. "Not yet, but you will." He released her then and stepped back, and Olivia felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. Tom and Jack had discreetly disappeared into the bunkhouse, leaving them alone on the porch under the vast starry sky. "You should get some rest," Xavier said. "It has been a long, frightening evening. We can talk more tomorrow." Olivia nodded, still feeling shaken by everything that had happened, by the words that had been spoken. She turned to go inside, then paused at the door. "Xavier, I am glad you are safe, and I am glad I am here with you." His smile could have lit the darkness. So am I, darling, so am I. That night, Olivia lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything Xavier had said. He loved her. He wanted her to stay. And God help her, she wanted to stay too. Seattle, which had seemed like her only hope just days ago, now felt like a distant dream, something from another life entirely. But was it really that simple? Could she just abandon her plans, give up her independence, and place her future in the hands of another man? Even a man as good as Xavier seemed to be, her practical side argued that she barely knew him, that a week was not enough time to make such a momentous decision. But her heart, the part of her that had been dormant for so long, whispered that sometimes you just knew. Sometimes you recognized home when you found it. The next morning, Olivia rose determined to continue with her work and not dwell on the complicated feelings swirling inside her. She made breakfast, fed the ranch hands, and tackled the laundry that had been piling up. Xavier spent most of the day out on the range again, checking the boundaries and making sure there were no more incursions from Miller's men. It was late afternoon when Olivia heard a wagon approaching. She walked out onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw Martha Sullivan from the boarding house driving up with another woman Olivia did not recognize. "Miss Jenkins," Martha called cheerfully. "I hope you do not mind us dropping by unannounced. I wanted to see how you were settling in, and this is my friend Sarah Dixon. Her husband runs the general store in town." Olivia welcomed them warmly, grateful for the female company. She served them tea and the cake she had baked that morning, and the three women sat on the porch enjoying the relative coolness of the late afternoon. "The house looks wonderful," Martha said, looking around approvingly. "Xavier must be thrilled to have a woman managing things again. Poor boy was living like an animal before you arrived." Sarah, a plump woman in her 40s with a kind smile, nodded enthusiastically. "Martha has been singing your praises all week. She says you are a miracle worker." Olivia felt herself blushing. "I am just doing the work I was hired to do." Martha and Sarah exchanged a knowing look. "Is that all it is?" Martha asked gently. "Because the way Xavier looked at you when he brought you into town that first day, I thought I saw something more than an employer looking at a potential employee." "Martha," Sarah chided, but she was smiling. "Do not embarrass the poor girl." "I am not embarrassing her, I am trying to help her," Martha protested. "Olivia, dear, I know you were planning to move on to Seattle, but I hope you will consider staying here. Xavier is a good man. He deserves happiness, and I think you could be happy too if you gave this place a chance." Olivia set down her teacup with trembling hands. "I do not know what to do. Everything is happening so fast. I feel like I am standing at a crossroads, and whichever path I choose will determine the rest of my life." Sarah reached over and patted her hand. "That is because you are standing at a crossroads, dear. Life is full of them. But let me ask you something. When you think about leaving here in 2 weeks, about getting on that stage and continuing to Seattle, how does that make you feel?" Olivia thought about it honestly. "Sad," she admitted. "Anxious. Like I am losing something precious before I even had a chance to really hold on to it." "And when you think about staying," Martha prompted. "Terrified," Olivia said, "but also excited, hopeful, like maybe I could have the life I always dreamed of but never thought was possible." Martha smiled triumphantly. "There is your answer then. Fear is natural, especially after what you have been through, but fear should not be the thing that decides your future. Love should." "I do not know if it is love," Olivia protested weakly. "It has only been a week." "Sometimes a week is all it takes," Sarah said softly. "I knew my husband for 3 days before he proposed. We have been married 22 years now, and I have never regretted saying yes. When you know, you know." The women stayed for another hour, chatting about town gossip and sharing recipes. By the time they left, Olivia felt like she had made 2 new friends. She also felt more confused than ever about what she should do. That evening, Xavier returned earlier than usual. He looked tired but pleased about something. Over dinner, he explained that he had ridden out to a neighboring ranch and spoken with several other ranchers about the situation with Miller. "We have agreed to work together," Xavier said. "Miller has been causing trouble for everyone, pushing boundaries, letting his cattle graze on other people's land. We are going to present a united front. If he crosses the line again, he will be dealing with all of us, not just one isolated rancher." "That is good," Olivia said. "Strength in numbers." "Exactly." Xavier paused, then added, "One of the ranchers, James Hartford, he mentioned that his wife is looking for someone to help with their new baby. It would be good wages and a nice family to work for. I told him about you in case you were interested." Olivia looked up sharply. "Why would you do that?" Xavier met her eyes steadily. "Because I do not want you to think you have to stay here out of obligation or lack of options. If you decide to stay, I want it to be because you want to, not because you feel trapped. You deserve to know that there are other opportunities available if you want them." Olivia felt something shift in her chest. Here was this man, this good, honorable man, offering her not just his heart but also her freedom. He was not trying to trap her or manipulate her. He was giving her choices. "And if I did decide to work for the Hartford family," Olivia asked carefully, "would I still see you?" "Their ranch is about 10 miles south of here," Xavier said. "We would see each other in town occasionally at church on Sundays, but no, it would not be the same as this." "And if I decided to continue on to Seattle?" Xavier's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Then I would take you to the stage myself and wish you well, and I would hope that someday you might write to let me know you arrived safely." Olivia pushed back from the table and stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the ranch, at the land that had started to feel like home. She thought about her cousin in Seattle, a woman she had never met who might not even remember inviting her to visit. She thought about the long journey ahead, the uncertainty, the loneliness. Then she thought about Xavier, about his kindness and his strength, his humor and his integrity. She thought about the way he looked at her, like she was something precious. She thought about the way her heart leaped every time she heard his footsteps on the porch. She thought about the future they could build together if she was brave enough to reach for it. She turned back to face him. Xavier was watching her with an expression of carefully controlled hope, like a man afraid to want something too much for fear of losing it. "What if I do not want to work for the Hartford family?" Olivia said slowly. "What if I do not want to go to Seattle?" Xavier stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Then what do you want?" Olivia took a deep breath and said the words that had been building inside her all week. "I want to stay here, with you, not as your housekeeper but as your partner, your equal. I want to build a life here together." Xavier crossed the room in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms. "Are you sure? I will not hold you to this if you change your mind. I just need to know that you are choosing this because you want it, not because you feel like you have no other choice." "I am choosing you," Olivia said firmly, her hands coming up to frame his face. "I am choosing us. I am choosing home." Xavier's kiss was everything Olivia had dreamed of and more. It was gentle but passionate, tender but claiming, a promise and a celebration all at once. She kissed him back with all the emotion that had been building inside her, all the hope and fear and joy tangled together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision." "I know you will," Olivia whispered, "and I will spend mine proving that I can be the partner you deserve." They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, and Olivia felt something she had not felt in years. She felt safe. She felt cherished. She felt found. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Xavier and Olivia began planning their future together. He proposed properly, with a ring that had belonged to his mother, a simple gold band with a small sapphire that sparkled like the summer sky. Olivia accepted with tears streaming down her face, and they decided to marry as soon as possible. Martha and Sarah helped Olivia plan a simple but lovely wedding. It would take place at the small church in Redemption Springs in 3 weeks' time, which seemed both too far away and rushing too fast. Olivia wrote to her cousin in Seattle, explaining that her plans had changed and that she had found a home in Arizona territory. She also wrote to her husband's family in Philadelphia, closing that chapter of her life for good. Xavier took Olivia into town to meet more of the community. She discovered that Redemption Springs, despite its small size, had a close-knit population who looked out for one another. The shopkeepers welcomed her warmly, and several women invited her to join the Church Ladies' Society. She was no longer a stranger passing through. She was becoming part of something larger, something real. As the wedding day approached, Olivia threw herself into preparing the ranch house. She wanted it to be perfect for their life together. She sewed new curtains for the bedroom they would share, planted flowers in the front garden, and worked with Xavier to paint the exterior of the house a fresh, clean white. Tom and Jack helped with the heavier work, and both men seemed genuinely happy for their boss. One evening, about a week before the wedding, Olivia and Xavier were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. She was leaning against him, his arm around her shoulders, and everything felt perfect. "Are you nervous?" Xavier asked, his voice rumbling in his chest. "A little," Olivia admitted. "Not about marrying you, I am certain about that, but about being a good wife, a good partner. I was not very successful at it the first time." Xavier turned to look at her, his expression serious. "That was not your fault, Olivia. You were married to a man who did not value you, who did not see the treasure he had. I promise you I see you. I value you. And I will spend every day of our marriage making sure you know it." Olivia felt tears sting her eyes. How did I get so lucky? A month ago I was lost and desperate, and now I have everything I ever wanted. "We are both lucky," Xavier said. "I had given up on the idea of finding love, of having a partner to share my life with. Then you stepped off that stagecoach, trembling and lost, and everything changed." "You changed everything, Olivia." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear the cattle settling in for the night and the lonely call of a coyote. It was peaceful and perfect, and Olivia felt her heart swell with gratitude. "I want to give you children," she said suddenly. "If we are blessed with them, I want to fill this house with life and laughter. I want to grow old with you here, watching the sunsets from this porch." Xavier's arm tightened around her. "I want that too, more than I can say. But Olivia, even if we are not blessed with children, even if it is just the two of us for the rest of our lives, that will be enough. You are enough." Olivia turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring all her love and hope and certainty into that kiss. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. The sky was clear and blue, and a gentle breeze kept the heat bearable. Olivia dressed in the gown that Martha and Sarah had helped her sew, a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored cotton with lace trim. She wore wildflowers in her hair and the sapphire ring on her finger. Martha came to help her get ready, and the older woman had tears in her eyes as she looked at Olivia. "You look beautiful, dear, like an angel. Xavier is not going to know what hit him." Olivia laughed, feeling giddy with nerves and excitement. I cannot believe this is really happening. A month ago I had nothing and nobody. Now I am about to marry the most wonderful man I have ever known. You deserve this happiness, Martha said firmly. Both of you do. Now come on, we do not want to keep that cowboy waiting. The ceremony took place in the small church with its whitewashed walls and simple wooden pews. The whole town seemed to have turned out for the occasion. Tom and Jack sat in the front row, both looking uncomfortable in their Sunday best. Sarah and her husband were there, along with several other ranchers and their families. Even the sheriff and the doctor had come. But Olivia only had eyes for Xavier. He stood at the front of the church looking more handsome than should be legal, wearing clean black pants, a white shirt, and a black vest. His hair was neatly combed and his face was freshly shaven. When he saw her walking down the aisle, his entire face lit up with such joy that Olivia felt her own eyes fill with tears. The ceremony was simple, but meaningful. They exchanged vows before God and the community, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for as long as they both lived. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation could be heard sniffling. The reception was held at the boarding house, where Martha had prepared a feast. There was music and dancing, and Xavier proved to be a surprisingly good dancer. He held Olivia close as they swayed to the fiddle music, and she felt like she was floating. "Happy," Xavier murmured in her ear. "Deliriously," Olivia replied. "This is the happiest day of my life." "Mine too," Xavier said. "And I promise you there will be many more happy days to come. This is just the beginning, Mrs. Kane." Mrs. Kane. Olivia loved the sound of that. She was no longer Olivia Jenkins, the desperate widow with no prospects. She was Olivia Kane, beloved wife of Xavier Kane, member of this community, woman with a home and a future. As the sun set and the celebration continued, Olivia found herself standing on the porch of the boarding house, looking out at the town that had become her home. Xavier came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Home. Yes, she was ready to go home. To the ranch that was now theirs, to the life they would build together, to the future that stretched out before them full of promise and possibility. They left the celebration to cheers and well wishes, climbing into Xavier's wagon for the ride back to the ranch. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. They rode in comfortable silence, Xavier's hand covering hers, both of them savoring the moment. When they reached the ranch, Xavier pulled the wagon to a stop but did not immediately get down. Instead, he turned to Olivia and said, "I want to do this properly." Before she could ask what he meant, he had jumped down and come around to her side. Then, to her surprise and delight, he swept her up into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "Xavier," she laughed, "what are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said, grinning. "It is tradition." He carried her up the porch steps, managing to open the door without putting her down, and carried her inside the house that was now their home. Only then did he set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. The house was quiet and peaceful. Tom and Jack had made themselves scarce, staying in town for the night to give the newlyweds privacy. Lamps had been lit, casting a warm glow throughout the rooms. Olivia had cleaned and decorated earlier in the day, and everything looked perfect. Xavier cupped her face in his hands, his blue eyes serious and full of love. "Olivia Kane, I am the luckiest man alive. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for making me believe in love again." "I should be thanking you," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me, Xavier, in every way a person can be saved. You are my hero." You saved yourself, Xavier corrected gently. You had the courage to leave everything behind and start over. You had the strength to take a chance on a new life. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to help. Olivia shook her head. No, you whispered you are found now, darling, and it was true. I was lost, but with you I am found. I am home. Xavier kissed her then, and there was nothing gentle or careful about it. It was a claiming, a celebration, a promise of all the nights to come. Olivia kissed him back with equal passion, finally free to express all the desire and love that had been building between them for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier took her hand and led her upstairs to their bedroom. The room glowed with candlelight, and someone had scattered flower petals across the clean white sheets. It was romantic and perfect, and Olivia felt her heart overflow with happiness. Their wedding night was everything Olivia had dreamed of, and nothing like her first marriage. Xavier was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs and desires. He made her feel cherished and beautiful, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with love and joy rather than duty and obligation. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, talking and laughing and planning their future. Life settled into a new rhythm. Olivia was no longer the housekeeper but the lady of the house, Xavier's partner in every sense of the word. She continued to manage the household, but she also began to take an active role in ranch operations. She learned about cattle and horses, about land management and weather patterns. Xavier taught her to ride, and soon she was accompanying him out on the range, checking fences and moving cattle. The ranch prospered under their joint management. With Olivia's organizational skills and Xavier's ranching knowledge, they made a formidable team. They hired 2 more ranch hands as the herd grew, and Olivia proved to have a talent for managing the books and negotiating prices with buyers. As the months passed, Olivia threw herself into becoming part of the community. She joined the Church Ladies' Society and helped organize a school for the children of Redemption Springs. She made friends with the other ranch wives, and the house became a gathering place for dinners and celebrations. Xavier watched his wife blossom with pride and love. She had been so lost and uncertain when she first arrived, but now she moved through life with confidence and purpose. She laughed easily, smiled often, and brought joy to everyone around her. He thanked God every day for the chance encounter that had brought her into his life. 6 months after their wedding, Olivia began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Xavier, not wanting to raise his hopes prematurely. But when the doctor in Redemption Springs confirmed her suspicions, she rushed home to share the news. Xavier was in the barn when she found him, repairing a broken stall door. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him work. He had his shirt sleeves rolled up and sawdust clung to his forearms. He was humming one of the songs they had danced to at their wedding, and Olivia felt her heart swell with love. "Xavier," she called softly. He looked up and smiled, that warm, open smile that still made her knees weak. "There is my beautiful wife. How was your trip to town?" "Productive," Olivia said, moving closer. "The doctor confirmed what I suspected. I am pregnant, Xavier. We are going to have a baby." Xavier dropped the piece of wood he was holding and stared at her, his face cycling through shock, joy, and wonder. "Truly, you are certain?" "The doctor is certain," Olivia confirmed, laughing at his expression. "I am about 3 months along. The baby should arrive in late summer." Xavier let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. When he finally set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Olivia, you have made me the happiest man alive." "I am pretty happy myself," Olivia said, her own eyes wet. I was so afraid I might not be able to have children. My first husband and I tried for years with no success. But now, with you, everything is different." Xavier placed his hand gently over her still flat stomach. "Our child. A new life to love and raise together. This is everything I ever dreamed of and more." They stood there in the barn, holding each other and marveling at the miracle growing inside her. Olivia thought back to the day she had stepped off that stagecoach, trembling and lost and terrified. She never could have imagined then that less than a year later, she would be standing in a barn in Arizona territory, married to a man she loved more than life itself and carrying his child. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia continued her work around the ranch, though Xavier and the ranch hands became increasingly protective as her belly grew. Martha and Sarah were thrilled about the baby and threw Olivia a lovely party where the women of the community brought gifts and advice. As Olivia's due date approached, Xavier became increasingly nervous. He was terrified something would go wrong, that he would lose either Olivia or the baby or both. She tried to reassure him, but she could see the fear in his eyes every time he looked at her swollen belly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch, her in the rocking chair Xavier had built and him perched on the railing nearby. "I am strong and healthy. The doctor says everything looks perfect. You need to stop worrying." "I cannot help it," Xavier admitted. "The thought of losing you terrifies me. You are everything to me, Olivia. Everything." Olivia reached out and took his hand. "You are not going to lose me. I survived losing everything, traveled across the country alone, and started a completely new life. I am not about to let something as natural as childbirth defeat me. I have too much to live for now." Xavier raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Promise me. Promise you will fight to come back to me." "I promise," Olivia said solemnly. "I am not going anywhere, Xavier Kane. You are stuck with me for at least the next 50 or 60 years." Despite her reassurances, labor turned out to be difficult. It started in the middle of a hot August night and lasted for nearly 20 hours. The doctor came from town and set up in their bedroom while Xavier paced downstairs, driving Tom and Jack crazy with his anxiety. Upstairs, Olivia fought through wave after wave of pain, Martha and the doctor coaching her through it. There were moments when she was not sure she could do it, moments when the agony seemed unbearable. But then she thought about Xavier waiting for her downstairs, about the baby she had not yet met, about the life they were building together. She thought about all she had survived to get to this point, and she found the strength to keep going, finally. Just as the sun was setting on the second day, a lusty cry filled the room. Olivia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant, as the doctor held up a squirming, red-faced baby. "It is a boy," the doctor announced with a grin. "A healthy, strong boy with an impressive set of lungs." Martha quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him carefully in Olivia's arms. Olivia looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face and his shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. This was her child, hers and Xavier's. A miracle born of love. "Somebody better go tell that poor man downstairs before he wears a hole in the floor," Martha said, smiling through her tears. A moment later, Xavier burst into the room, his face pale and his eyes wild. "Olivia, are you all right?" "I am fine," Olivia said, her voice tired but happy. "Come meet your son." Xavier approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid he might break something. He looked down at the baby in Olivia's arms and his entire face transformed. Wonder, love, and awe all played across his features. "A son," he breathed. "We have a son." "Would you like to hold him?" Olivia asked. Xavier nodded mutely and carefully took the baby from her arms. He held his son with surprising confidence, cradling the tiny body against his chest. The baby stopped fussing and seemed to settle immediately, as if he recognized his father's touch. "Hello, little one," Xavier murmured. "Welcome to the world. You have no idea how wanted you are, how loved you already are. Your mama and I are going to do our best to give you a good life, full of love and laughter and everything good." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she watched her husband with their son. This was everything she had never dared to dream of, everything she had thought was beyond her reach. Love, family, home, belonging. She had found it all with this man in this harsh but beautiful land. "What should we name him?" Xavier asked, still not taking his eyes off the baby. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not made any final decisions. Now, looking at her son, Olivia knew exactly what his name should be. "Thomas," she said, "after your father, Thomas Nathaniel Kane." Xavier looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Are you sure? I do not want to pressure you. I am sure," Olivia said. "Your father built this ranch, built the foundation of the life we now share. He would have been a wonderful grandfather. I want to honor his memory." Xavier carefully returned the baby to Olivia and then leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you for our son, for choosing to stay, for making me believe in love and family again. You have given me everything, Olivia." "We have given each other everything," Olivia corrected. "We are partners, remember, equal in all things." As Martha and the doctor quietly left the room to give them privacy, Xavier climbed carefully onto the bed beside Olivia. Together they looked down at their son, this new life they had created together. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered. "He is," Olivia agreed. Then she looked up at her husband, at the man who had found her when she was lost, who had loved her when she felt unlovable, who had given her a home when she had nowhere to go. "We are all perfect, just as we are." Life with a newborn was exhausting but joyful. Thomas was a healthy baby with a hearty appetite and strong lungs. Xavier proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with his son during those long nighttime hours, changing diapers without complaint, and staring at the baby with a look of perpetual wonder. As Thomas grew from a newborn to an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Xavier and Olivia worked hard, building not just a business but a legacy for their son. They expanded the herd, improved the land, and built their reputation as fair and honest dealers. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Thomas was joined by a daughter they named Sarah, after Xavier's mother. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named James. The house that had once been lonely and silent was now filled with the sounds of children laughing, playing, and growing. Olivia sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was all real. She had gone from having nothing to having everything, from being lost to being found, from being alone to being surrounded by love. Xavier never let a day pass without telling her he loved her. He brought her wildflowers from the range, built her things to make her life easier, and always treated her as his equal partner. The passion between them never faded, but instead deepened with time and shared experience. As the children grew, Olivia taught them to read and write, to be kind and honest, to work hard and value family. Xavier taught them about the ranch, about respecting the land and the animals, about honor and integrity. Together, they raised their children to be strong, capable people who would go out into the world and make their mark. The ranch became a gathering place for the community. Olivia and Xavier hosted barn dances and holiday celebrations, always opening their home to friends and neighbors. They helped new settlers get established, loaned equipment to those in need, and became pillars of redemption springs. Years turned into decades. Thomas grew into a fine young man who shared his father's love of ranching. Sarah inherited her mother's sharp mind and organizational skills. James proved to have a gift with horses that made him invaluable to the ranch operations. One by one, the children grew up, married, and started families of their own, though they all stayed in the area, building their own ranches and businesses. Olivia and Xavier aged together, their hair turning gray, their faces acquiring new lines and creases. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared joys and weathered sorrows, by a lifetime of choosing each other over and over again. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house overflowed with family, and the sounds of laughter and conversation filled every room. After dinner, as the sun began to set, Olivia and Xavier slipped away to their favorite place on the porch. They sat in the rocking chairs they had occupied countless times over the years, holding hands and watching the grandchildren play in the yard. Xavier turned to look at his wife, this woman who had transformed his life so completely. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here instead of continuing on to Seattle?" Olivia laughed and squeezed his hand. "Not for a single moment. Seattle was just a destination born of desperation. This is home. You are home. You always have been." "I still remember the first time I saw you," Xavier said, his voice soft with memory. "Stepping off that stagecoach, trembling and lost. I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change. I just did not know how much. You found me," Olivia said simply. "In every way that matters, you found me. And I found myself in the process. I became the person I was always meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. Their oldest grandson, also named Xavier, came running up to the porch. "Grandmother, grandfather, come see what we built in the barn." Olivia and Xavier exchanged an amused glance and carefully stood up. Their joints were not as limber as they once were, but they were still active and healthy. Hand in hand, they followed their grandson to the barn, where the children had constructed an elaborate fort out of hay bales. As they admired the children's handiwork and listened to their excited chatter, Olivia felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. This was what she had been searching for all those years ago when she stepped off that stagecoach. Not just a place to live, but a purpose. Not just survival, but a life worth living. Not just existence, but love in all its forms. That night, after the celebration had ended and the house had finally quieted down, Olivia and Xavier lay in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been for 30 years. "Thank you," Xavier murmured into the darkness. "For what?" Olivia asked. "For saying yes. For staying. For building this life with me. For our children and grandchildren. For 30 years of love and laughter. For everything." Olivia tilted her face up to kiss him. "The pleasure has been all mine, Cowboy. You took a trembling, lost woman and showed her that she was strong all along. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. How could I possibly ask for anything more?" "Here is to 30 more years," Xavier said. "At least," Olivia agreed. "I am not done with you yet, Xavier Kane." They fell asleep as they always did, tangled together, hearts beating in sync. Outside, the ranch they had built together spread out under the stars. Cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. Horses dozed in the stable. The land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had become home, shaped by love and hard work into a legacy that would endure for generations. Olivia's story had begun with fear and desperation, with loss and uncertainty. But it had transformed into something beautiful, something lasting. She had stepped off that stagecoach trembling and lost, but a cowboy had whispered that she was found. And in finding each other, they had found everything that truly mattered. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Xavier and Olivia watched their grandchildren grow and welcomed great-grandchildren. The ranch remained in the family, passed from generation to generation, each one adding their own mark while honoring the foundation that Xavier and Olivia had built. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by more family than they could have imagined in those early days. Thomas had taken over the day-to-day running of the ranch, though Xavier still rode out most days to check on things. Sarah had married a banker and moved to Phoenix, though she visited often. James had expanded into horse breeding and had built a successful business that supplied horses throughout the territory. As they grew older, Xavier and Olivia spent more time on their beloved porch, watching the sunsets and reminiscing about the life they had shared. They talked about the early days, about the fear and hope that had brought them together. They talked about their children and grandchildren, about the legacy they would leave behind. They talked about everything and nothing, content simply to be together. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Olivia asked one evening, her hand clasped in Xavier's weathered one. "When I was standing in the street, trembling and lost," Xavier smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I said, 'You are found now, darling,' and you were. You are. We found each other exactly when we needed to." "I was so scared," Olivia admitted. "So certain that my life was over, that I would never be happy again. And then there you were, like an answer to a prayer I had not even known how to speak." "God works in mysterious ways," Xavier said. "He brought a woman from Philadelphia and a rancher from Arizona Territory together in the middle of nowhere. Against all odds, we found love." "More than love," Olivia corrected. "We found partnership, we found purpose, we found home." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Xavier pulled Olivia closer. Despite their age, despite the years that had passed, she still fit perfectly against his side, still made his heart beat faster with her presence. "I love you, Olivia Kane," he said, as he had said countless times over the decades. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "And I love you, Xavier Kane," Olivia replied. "You saved me. You loved me. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Xavier said. "Two lost souls who found each other and built something beautiful. That is not luck. That is destiny." They sat there until the stars came out, until the grandchildren called them in for dinner. They stood slowly, their bodies stiff but their spirits young, and walked hand in hand into the house filled with the family they had created together. The story of how Olivia and Xavier met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The children and grandchildren never tired of hearing about the day grandmother stepped off the stagecoach, trembling and lost, and how grandfather had found her. How he had offered her work and dignity, and how love had bloomed between them like wildflowers in the desert. Their great-grandchildren would ask Olivia what it felt like to be so lost, and she would tell them honestly about the fear and desperation, about having nothing and nobody. But then she would smile and tell them about Xavier's kindness, about the hope that had begun to bloom in her heart, about the courage it took to choose love over fear. Xavier would tell the children about seeing Olivia for the first time, about knowing somehow that his life was about to change. He would tell them about the early days of their marriage, about learning to be partners, about building the ranch together. He would tell them that true love was not just about feelings, but about choices made every day to honor and cherish the person you had committed yourself to. As Xavier and Olivia entered their 80s, they slowed down but never stopped. They still rose with the sun, still had their coffee together on the porch, still held hands and stole kisses when they thought nobody was looking. The grandchildren would giggle at their displays of affection, and Olivia would tell them that true love never aged, never faded, never became less important. On a warm spring morning in their 83rd year, Xavier woke to find Olivia watching him with a soft smile on her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, reaching over to brush a strand of white hair from her face. "I am thinking about how blessed I have been," Olivia said. "I am thinking about that scared young woman who stepped off a stagecoach 55 years ago, certain that her life was over. I am thinking about the man who found her and loved her and built a life with her beyond anything she could have imagined." Xavier pulled her close, and they lay there in the early morning light, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had for over 5 decades. "We have had a good life," Xavier said. "Better than good, extraordinary." "The best life," Olivia agreed, "and it is not over yet. We still have time, still have love, still have each other." They rose and began their day as they always did together. They had breakfast with Thomas and his wife, who lived in the main house with them now. They walked out to look at the land they had spent a lifetime tending. They sat on the porch and watched their great-great-grandchildren play in the yard, 4 generations of love stemming from that one moment when a trembling woman met a kind cowboy. As the years continued to pass, Xavier and Olivia remained devoted to each other and to the family they had created. They lived to see their 90th year, a remarkable achievement that the entire community celebrated. On their 65th wedding anniversary, nearly 100 family members gathered at the ranch for what would become a legendary celebration. Olivia and Xavier sat in places of honor, watching the festivities with joy and pride. Their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren all mingled together, a living testament to the love that had started it all. Thomas stood to give a speech, his own hair now gray and his own grandchildren surrounding him. "My parents built more than a ranch," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "They built a legacy of love, of partnership, of commitment to family and community. They showed us what it means to truly love someone, to choose them every single day, to build a life together that honors both people equally." Sarah added her own words. "Our mother stepped off a stagecoach trembling and lost, and our father found her. But the truth is, they found each other. They saved each other. And in doing so, they gave all of us this incredible family, this amazing legacy." James raised his glass. "To Xavier and Olivia Kane, the finest parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents anyone could ask for, may their love continue to inspire us for generations to come." The crowd echoed the toast, and Olivia felt tears streaming down her face. Xavier squeezed her hand and whispered in her ear, "We did good, darling. We did real good." "We did more than good," Olivia replied. "We created something that will last forever, our love, our family, our legacy. It will go on long after we are gone." They danced that night, their great-great-grandchildren helping them to sway to the music. Their bodies were old and tired, but their hearts were as young as they had been on their wedding day 65 years before. As the celebration wound down and the family began to depart, Xavier and Olivia returned to their spot on the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had watched over them for all these years. "You have any regrets?" Xavier asked, as he sometimes did. "Not a single one," Olivia replied, as she always did. "This life, this love, this family, it is everything I never knew I needed, everything I never dared to dream of. You gave me all of that, Xavier, you and that moment when you whispered that I was found." "You gave me just as much," Xavier insisted. You brought joy and light and purpose to a life that was good but incomplete. You made me a better man, a father, a grandfather. You made me whole." They sat there in the darkness, surrounded by the land they loved and the family they had built. They sat there until the night grew cold and someone came to help them inside. They sat there knowing that no matter what happened, no matter how much time they had left, they had lived a life worth living. They had loved deeply and completely. They had built something that would endure. They had found each other against all odds and had chosen each other every single day since. The woman had stepped off the stagecoach trembling and lost. The cowboy had found her and promised she was safe. Together, they had created a love story for the ages, a legacy that would be told and retold for generations to come. And as they climbed the stairs to their bedroom that night, hand in hand as always, Xavier turned to Olivia one more time. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," Olivia replied. "Always and forever." It was enough. It was everything. It was the perfect ending to a perfect day in a life filled with love. Xavier and Olivia lived to see their 95th year, still together, still devoted, still very much in love. When Olivia finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, Xavier held her hand and whispered one last time, "You are found, darling. Always found. Wait for me, and I will find you again." He followed her 6 months later, his heart simply unable to continue without the woman who had been his partner for nearly 70 years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Arizona sky they had both loved so much. Their tombstone bore a simple inscription chosen by their children, "Xavier and Olivia Kane. She was lost and trembling. He found her. Together they found home." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants. The house still stood strong, still filled with family during holidays and celebrations. The land still produced cattle and horses. The legacy of love that Xavier and Olivia had built lived on in every generation that followed. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings, family members swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch, rocking gently and holding hands, watching the sunset together as they always had. The woman who had stepped off the stagecoach trembling and lost, and the cowboy who had found her, together for all eternity in the home they had built with love.